Maisa, it's always good to be back, Baruch Hashem, back in Eretz Yisrael, back in Yeshiva. So one of the things that I really wanted to discuss, as sort of a hagdama, almost an introduction into something which I want to get into next week, is the following. If I didn't remember my very heilige and special Gewaldige Shver was here over Yom Tov, and he actually spoke at the last meal of Simchas Torah on Yom Tov afternoon. It was the last meal of Yom Tov after a whole Yom Tov, for the culmination of the whole Yom Noraim. And he said over the following story, and I happen to know the person that he was referring to, and I just want to use that as an idea for something that I want to speak about. As I said, as a little bit of an introduction, more for next week, but something which I think is important also. He mentioned that there was a Yid who's no longer in the world, but he was not that long ago. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, Chassidish Yid, a very tall, big, strong Satmar Chassid who lived in Manchester, England, and used to give shir in my Shver's house. And I remember this all the time. He used to come in, he used to give shir to the Balabatim over there, and he was a tremendous Talmud Chacham, A story, but not for now, is he was actually pulled out of the gas chambers in Auschwitz. I don't know how many people you know. I mean, I knew him, I spoke to him many times. He was pulled out of the gas chamber in Auschwitz, mamish. Like he was in the gas chamber, they had closed the door, and then all of a sudden they reopened it. Right at that stage, everyone like, you give up, it's over, right? You just say Shema Yisrael. But he said, no, we don't give up. And he was telling the people around him, we don't give up, even if the sword, even if the sword is on our throat, we don't give up. All of a sudden, the gas chamber door opens up. They're looking for a strong person for work. Rabbi Yaakov Yosef was a really big person. You, out. And he got saved. Unbelievable story. Anyway, not for now. But Al Kaponim, the story that my Shver said was as follows. He walked into the house one day and he said, Rabbi Sai, I just saw the most amazing Rashi. What a Rashi. And everyone was like, really? He's 75 years old, maybe older. A Baki B'Shas, Poiskim, Rishonim, Achroinim. He's probably been learning Chumash for over 65 years, at least, maybe even 70. Wow, he found an amazing Rashi. What does that mean? What's Pshat? So I asked him, and he said, that's the Gadlus of Torah. The Gadlus of Torah is that you can keep learning it again and again and again, and you'll always find new things. And you'll always find something that will talk to you that perhaps last year you didn't find. So I just want to speak about this for a moment, because we just started again a few weeks ago. Sefer Bereshis, Parashat Bereshis, Chamisha Chumshei Torah, we started all over again, and sometimes we don't even give Chumash, basic Chumash, the importance that it needs. Chumash, the Torah, is what guides us. The Torah is what guides a Yid in how to live a successful life, how to live a life of meaning, of fulfillment, a happy life. The Torah not only is giving us what happened, especially now in these parashas, right? Yeah, Bereshis, Noach, Lech Lecha. There's so much going on. The stories, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov are coming up, Moshe Rabbeinu. There's so much. It's not just a storybook. The Torah teaches us how to look at life in a Torah-dic lens. How to look at life not in our perspective, but in the Torah's perspective. So when you learn Chumash, you're not learning the stories of what happened, but the Torah is teaching us a message for every generation. That means the Torah is talking to us right now in this generation. You ever found that whenever there was like some kind of crazy situation that happened in the world, whether it would be COVID, whether it was October 7th, whether it was whatever it was, always someone manages to find a remez in the Torah to this week's parasha that had happened. You have a bar mitzvah, you have a chasana, sheva brachas, you have a bris, and the Rav, or whoever it is, gets up and says a drasha on this week's parasha that's connected to the bris, connected to the chasen kala, connected to whatever it is. And you're like, wow, it's an amazing thing. But you know what that is? That's because the Torah has got so many layers to it. The Torah is so deep that it teaches us how to live on a daily basis. It teaches us who we are. And the greatest thing is that the bigger Talmid Chacham you are, the more layers you can peel off. And that's what this Gadol Rabbi Yaakov Yosef was saying, was at 75 years old, he found himself a beautiful Rashi. And I'm sure he'd learned the Rashi many, many times before. But this year, in his Chokhmah this year, he found something new. You know, the Torah can be learned in so many different ways. There's Soid, there's Remez, Drush, Pshat, which is basic understanding. The question is, why did the Torah write in a way that we learn things from it? Just tell it to us outright. Just outwardly tell us what it is, what we need to know. I'll give you an example. For example, the Torah says, Shemos Chavalev, ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye. What does that mean? Literally, that means that if somebody damages an eye, you take his eye out. You damage his eye, an eye for an eye. That's the translation. Chazal tell us that's not pshat. Chazal explain it doesn't mean that we damage an eye of a person that damaged somebody else's eye, but rather it's the monetary value, whatever it may be. In the Lashon of Rav Sadia Goin, Ki divrei Torah yesh lahem pinimi v'chitzoin giloi v'nista. There is so much hidden within the Torah. We just have to peel off the layers. And sometimes you ask someone, you ever learn Chumash? Chumash? We did this years ago. We're still learning Chumash. Open up a Chumash. We just started now. Sefer Bereshis. Okay, Noach. This week is Lech Lecha. Open up the Torah and look at how the Torah wants us to live. Because the Torah is speaking to every generation, even us in this generation as well. And that's what's important. Our Chaim HaKadosh brings, the beginning of Bereshis, he says, our Chaim HaKadosh, we have reshus, we have permission to explain things that are not written as long as it was learned b'yishuv adas, ki yesh shivim ponim l'Torah. There's so many different ways of understanding, translating, and explaining Torah, that if you do it b'yishuv adas, properly in the right frame of mind, with the right mahalach and your right understanding, you're able to explain things that were never explained before. Everything in the Torah comes, every simon and Shulchan Aruch comes from the Torah. The Vilna Gaon famously would open up a Chumash, and through looking at the Chumash, he was able to see every single halach in Shulchan Aruch, a whole Shulchan Aruch on the shelf, but he was able to see it from the Torah, because everything comes from there. So I want to give you an example. I want to give you an example of this week's parasha, just to give you something, and again, like I said, this is more of an introduction into the halacha share that we're going to be giving next week. You know, we start this week in Parashas Lech Lecha, the nisyonos of Avram Avinu, the challenges. Avram Avinu, by the way, did not have an easy life. He went through challenge after some of the hardest challenges ever known to man. 10 nisyonos, and he passed every single one with flying colors. Unbelievable thing. Every single person in life has challenges. Every single person goes through life and has challenges. We all have challenges. Don't think for one moment that life that you're going to have in the next, Be'ezus Hashem, 100 and something years, depending on exactly how old you are, is going to be easy, smooth sailing. There's going to be lots and lots of challenges. That's the Metzias. But we are taught that in this week's parasha, Avram Avinu was Megala, the Shoirish, the first source, the first root of every challenge, that he had to schwitz, and Avram Avinu had to try and work really hard to get to be able to pass. And because Avram Avinu passed that test, every one of us can pass our tests, because we're a child of Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu gave us the koyach to be able to pass every single challenge. That means every single generation, from then until today, until the end of time, and whenever there's a challenge, whenever there's a hardship, whenever there's a difficulty, and you look at people, by the way, sometimes, and we don't have to look far, unfortunately. I'm sure every person in this room knows people with tremendous challenges, whether it's health challenges, parnasa challenges, whether it's shalom bayis, whether it's all, but there's so many ranges of challenges. We know people with challenges, and sometimes you wonder, how do they manage? How do they get through it? How can they possibly go on after that? And the answer is this week's parasha. Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu is Megala to us that yes, you can pass every test. It might be difficult. It might be challenging. It might be hard. But yes, you can do it. You know why? Because you're a child of Avram Avinu. And the child of Avraham Avinu was given the koyach, the strength, by Avraham Avinu to be able to do that. Which is why Reb Chaim Volozhin, by the way, writes in his beautiful Sefer Ruach Chaim, which is a parish on Pirkei Avos, in Perikei Mishnah Gimel, when the Mishnah says, Asora nisyonos nisnas Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu had 10 tests. Interesting, says Reb Chaim Volozhin in Ruach Chaim. We call him Avraham Avinu. But before, when it says Monoyach ad Avram, we don't say Avinu. Why not? It says Reb Chaim Volozhin in Ruach Chaim and Parish and Pirkei Avos. You know why? Because after Avram Avinu had the nisyonis, he had his tests, and he passed those tests, he became Avinu. Because every father gives over to his children the character traits, the personality, the strengths that he has. Avram Avinu also gave us tremendous strengths as well. That's why he's called Avinu. He's called Avinu because he gave us the strength to be able to do that. So Rabbi said, when you look at the Torah this week, what you're looking at is not just what Avraham Avinu went through. You're looking at what every single one of us go through in our own lives when we have challenges. And when we have a challenge, and when it's really difficult, we look up and we say, Avraham Avinu, you managed. You're our father. You gave us the koyach to do that. You hear stories of in the Holocaust how people walked into the gas chambers singing and dancing, Ashreinu ma toiv chalkeinu. And you think, when you hear these stories, how do you walk into the gas chamber b'simcha? How are you happy when you're about to be killed? And the answer is because they understood where they were coming from. They were understood that the choice wasn't theirs to have an assign. And by the way, it's true in our own lives also. Baruch Hashem, we don't have those challenges. We have our own challenges. But at the end of the day, every challenge that we have is not something that we choose. We don't choose the challenges that we have, but rather we choose how we respond to the challenge. We choose how we react to the challenge. That's what this week's parasha is teaching us. That's what Avraham Avinu gave us, the koyach within us. And Rabbi say, remember that. That's the message of the parasha. The message of the parasha this week is a message that's eternal forever. It happened then, but it's nageya now. That next time in life you have a challenge. And again, I don't want to burst anyone's bubble, but there are going to be challenges. Look up and say, Avraham Avinu, you're my father. You gave me the koyach. You did it, I can do it. You gave me the strength because of what you did. And that's what we have to realize. The Ramchal tells us in Perek Aleph, yes, we have challenges, but we have the koichas, we have the strength within us to be able to pass those challenges, to overcome those challenges. That's what the Torah is telling us in this week, and that's what every single word, every single letter of the Torah is teaching us, a message into our own lives. Next time you have a chance, open up a Chumash. Read the story of the Torah, but read the story also of your own life as well. And Be'ez Hashem will continue, B'siyata Shmaya, the next week to go into some of the halachas of what we're discussing. Have an amazing day.